Steve Gill.
On the day I took office, our auto industry was on the verge of collapse. Some even said we should let it die. With 1 million jobs at stake, I refused to let that happen. In exchange for help, we demanded responsibility. We got workers and automakers to settle their differences. We got the industry to retool and restructure. Today, General Motors is back on top as the world's #1 automaker.
Well, it's easy to do when you don't have to pay your bills, don't have to repay your debt. I mean, you can skate by and look pretty good for a little while, but then you've got to produce cars that people want to buy. You'd be like the Chevy Volt that their own dealers don't want to have to sell. The President of the United States in his State of the Union address last night, interestingly, not talking much about Obamacare. You know, his signature policy, the $1 trillion he spent on Obamacare. We just learned this week that actually the number of uninsured Americans, the number of Americans who have no health insurance, the percentage of uninsured Americans has actually gone up the last 3 years. So we spent $1 trillion and got nothing. We spent $1 trillion on an economic stimulus and got nothing but a higher unemployment rate. We spent $500 million on Solyndra to tout one of those green companies we've heard so much about. And, well, we got bankruptcy out of that one. A couple of thousand Americans out of work. So didn't hear much about that last night. A lot of stuff we didn't hear about, and what we did hear about last night was mostly untrue. One of the people in the room was Congresswoman Renee Ellmers from North Carolina, one of those key battleground states as we look to the fall. And she's on our Newsmakers line with us today. Congresswoman, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you. And, you know, the thing that was going through my head when he was talking about General Motors I was waiting for him to talk about how every American is going to have an electric car in their driveway by a certain year, because, you know, that's his plan for General Motors. And coming from General Motors, I'm the daughter of a General Motors employee, and the auto industry was near and dear to my heart when I lived in Michigan, and all my family works there too. So, you know, there again, let's tout what the government intervention that took place.
Well, and again, we've intervened in companies like Solyndra, given them $500 million, and they went out of business. I mean, you know, that's his, you know, manipulation of business. So he's now going to tell us he's going to put more and direct more of our money into these startup companies that he wants to do, bringing companies back to the United States. But then if they are successful, he wants to punish them with confiscatory tax rates.
Well, exactly. You know, that was the one of the issues that I had last night, was he was contradicting himself throughout the entire speech. And, you know, the other things he didn't talk about the fact that he said no to Keystone XL pipeline, and yet he's talking about natural gas and wanting to put the green energy and clean energy on public spaces. Let's talk about Keystone. Why did you say no? What was it that caused that problem? Because you know what? That's 20,000 immediate shovel-ready jobs, and he buried them. And, you know, moving forward, he didn't talk about the debt, the mounting debt, day after day, and yet we're going to do all of these programs and all this wonderful. This is no different than when he ran for office in 2008 with redistribution of wealth. We've just changed the words a little bit.
Well, and when he talked about everybody paying their fair share and sharing the responsibility, you've got tax cheat Tim Geithner sitting there, Charlie Rangel, who didn't pay his taxes, Warren Buffett's secretary. Warren Buffett isn't even paying the current tax rates. And by the way, speaking of Keystone, Warren Buffett's going to be one of the guys who benefits because his railroad's going to be transporting the oil that we're not going to pipeline. And he has the gall to sit there and talk about fair shared responsibility when 41 of his staffers owe nearly $1 million in back taxes from last year.
Well, apparently, if you're close to the Obama administration and you're a supporter and a big donor, then the fairness is all about you. But if you're someone else, then you get the shaft. And let's continue to give the hardworking taxpayer money to companies like Solyndra because it's clean energy.
You know, Congressman Burgess, one of your colleagues, a doctor from Texas, was with us a little while ago, and he pointed out that the president did not talk about the signature policy that has occupied so much of his time and was going to do so much good stuff, and yet we have more people now, a percentage of Americans uninsured than when he started and spent $1 trillion of our money. And he really didn't talk about Obamacare at all.
Not one.
And you're a nurse
word.
by background.
Absolutely, not one word. And the thing of it is, in all honesty, Obamacare doesn't technically kick in until 2014. But look at, as you've pointed out, there are more Americans now without health insurance. Health insurance costs have gone up. It costs more. We're losing jobs everywhere. I have some of my constituents back in the district who are trying to have their parents sign up with new doctors that aren't even taking new Medicare patients. This is the effect that Obamacare is having, and it isn't even in place yet.
Yeah, the other piece of Obamacare that gets ignored, and certainly was ignored by the president, is that a lot of the tax increases in Obamacare went into effect or were scheduled to go into effect, unless, of course, you got the waivers, and the overwhelming number of those waivers were granted to his union buddies.
Exactly. There again, if you're close to the Obama administration, then it's all about you.
Renee, step back and talk just a little bit about the politics of North Carolina. It's going to be one of those key battleground states in the fall. Last time, President Obama carried it by about 14,000 votes. Is he 14,000 votes as popular this time as he was last time, or your electoral vote's going to go into his column?
No, absolutely not. In fact, the wave in North Carolina is very much away from him. The good news in North Carolina is that we're just waiting to be an economic boom. We know that we need a new governor. The governor that we have right now has been completely and wholly ineffective. We need a Republican governor. We need to work towards that effort so that we can make the choices and the decisions that we need, and we can turn the economy around in North Carolina. It's just waiting to happen. But the problem is we've got those in power who are standing in the way of that prosperity.
When you look at the North Carolina economy, you've got a lot of colleges and universities, you've got a lot of high tech, and yet North Carolina, like the rest of the country, suffering with these high unemployment rates, despite the president's claims last night that the economy has turned the corner. There are millions of Americans who've given up looking for work, who don't count as unemployed. The real unemployment rate, by every economist analysis, is closer to 16% than it is the 8.5% they keep talking about.
Well, of course, because when you consider the underemployed, and you consider, as you pointed out, those who aren't even looking for jobs anymore, we have been at a sustained level of 8 or above unemployment nationwide. We're higher than that in North Carolina, and we continue on that path. And except the president is out there telling us that millions of jobs have been created. Well, how can we have a sustained number of 8% or higher in unemployment if millions of jobs are being created? Because that's not what I'm hearing from folks back home, and I know you're not hearing it either. So, there again, dog and pony show of failed policy and trying to make it work. No different. This is the same story we heard back in September. This is the same speech when he was on the campaign trail, when he was running for the presidency. It's no different. For him, the pie is only so big, and the only way you get a bigger piece is if you take away from someone else. And that is just simply not the American dream.
It may be too early to have heard any from your constituents or people back home to see how the speech played there. Mm-hmm. As you watched your Democrat colleagues, again, they're standing up and applauding at all the, circled, highlighted applause lines. Are they really buying this baloney anymore?
Well, to be honest, they believe in what they believe in, and they continue to support this president. They continue on this path. Being fiscally responsible is the issue here. We all want the best for America. The problem is when it comes to the federal government, the Republicans believe that we need to cut the size of government, we need to cut the spending that we're doing. And for the other side, they just say, hey, if we want these programs, all we have to do is raise taxes on those who are successful. That is just simply not the way to go about it. But that is their agenda. That is their mindset. And unfortunately, it's what we're up against. Well,
particularly when last night he was talking about shared responsibility when half of America pays zero federal income taxes. There's no shared responsibility when half the folks are paying nothing. I mean, what's he talking about?
Well, and then a lot of times he's talking about shared sacrifice. Well, you know what? The American people have sacrificed enough. And, fairness is relative. What's fair to you and what's fair to me may be two completely different things. And yet we continue to talk about this. Fairness is that's not what taxation is about. That's not what the federal government is about. That's not who we are. We are supposed to keep America strong. We are supposed to keep America safe. We are supposed to do the things that we need to do to make Americans prosperous, not continue to talk about fairness and growing the size of government. That is just never going to be the answer.
Well, particularly when their idea of fairness is, I'm going to take it from you and give it to my friends. I mean,
exactly.
That's their idea of charity as well. I'm going to take your money and give it to my friends. I'm not going to give any of my money. You've got Mitt Romney giving 15% of his income to charity, the president 1%, Joe Biden $369. Their charity with their money tells us everything we need to know. Renee, good to have you with us, and we may see you over in North Carolina. You may be hanging around that Democrat convention when we come over there later this year.
That would be great. Yeah,
we'll at least come and spend some money in this. We will try to help revitalize North Carolina.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us. We'll talk with you again soon. When we come back, we'll get your thoughts on the president's State of the Union. Were you buying any of his baloney? Are you feeling kind of bloated and overstuffed today? A lot of it was leftovers, too. We'll point that out in a moment. This is the Steve Gill Show.
Right wing and right on the issues. Steve Gill.
Hey, welcome in. This is the Steve Gill Show. Did you watch the President's State of the Union last night? Look, I watched so you don't have to. And it was painful. Man, it was painful. I did have to keep flipping to other shows and other things going on, just because I would start to feel my blood pressure going up. I would just feel the vomit rising in the back of my throat, and I would have to turn to something else just for a few minutes, just to sort of have a palate cleanser, and then come back to listen to more of the drivel that the one was dispensing with his telltale, nose pointed up, chin up, looking down at those little people below him. It was all Obama. It was typical Obama. It was the same sort of rhetoric and baloney that we've heard in the past. Nothing really new. In fact, if you'll go to the website, gillreport.com, the Republican National Committee has actually put together clips from his 2010 and 2011 State of the Union speeches, and they're identical. I mean, literally, it's a retread, a rehash of the same old, same old. And it's even more clear when you see visually that he said the same thing he's been saying, promoting the same policies that have failed. 800-688-9522. I thought Mitch Daniels, and I don't know if you didn't watch the speech, you probably didn't watch the Republican response, but Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, did a great job. In fact, Charles Krauthammer on Fox said it was the best response that could have been done, and he did a great job. Herman Cain did a response from the Tea Party, and Herman Cain did about a 12-minute response, and I've got that linked up on the website as well. I thought Herman Cain delivered a great rejoinder to the president, then took some questions as well afterwards. And again, those were actually better, I thought, than the president's speech. But when you're in the halls of Congress and there's all the glitz and the glamour of the big State of the Union speech, it's hard to step up and measure up to that. But again, I thought both Herman Cain and Mitch Daniels did a great job in the response as well. Let's get more of your responses to the State of the Union. Coming up, by the way, in about 15 minutes, Congressman Howard Buck McKeon from California, he's chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, is going to join us, give his take. The president last night making it seem like he camoed up and face camoed and went in and killed Osama bin Laden himself. Is anybody buying that baloney either? Anyway, let's get to your calls and comments. Donnie, you're next on the Steve Gill Show.
Hey, just one day, what I thought was funny, he honored Warren Buffett, and he's attacked Mitt Romney. This is the kind of interesting thing. Warren Buffett has one of his companies owes $1 billion in taxes, back taxes. Now think about that. Mitt Romney made $17 million last year. He owes 91 times more in back taxes than Mitt Romney made his total income.
And with what he's making, wouldn't you think Warren Buffett might have started giving his secretary the last 20 years some stock? Because if he'd been paying her a little bit of her salary in stock in his company, she'd be earning a bunch of her money from capital gains as well.
Yeah, that's true. And it's just crazy. I like I said, I'm like you. I only saw bits and pieces of it because I was working and going into the break room a couple times to catch it. And when you sit there talking about the jobs he created, when he came into office, there was 45 million full-time jobs in the United States. Today, they're 42 million. That's a $3 million loss in full-time employment. And that's not counting the increase of the working population.
Yeah, about half of America, working age America, under age 30 will not be going to work today. Half of Americans that could be working today will not be going to work because of his great economy that he was touting last night.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. But that amazed me when he said there, when I saw that Buffett owed $1 billion, and that, like I said, 91 times he owes in taxes, 91 times more than Mitt Romney made.
Well, keep in mind that the federal government employees owe $1 billion in back taxes just from last year that they haven't paid. $1 billion in taxes owed by people who get paid by our taxes. 41 employees on Obama's own staff, in the White House staff, owe $856,000 in back taxes right now from last year alone. If they want to start getting people to pay their fair share, start with the folks who helped you write that silly speech, Mr. President.
That's true. I mean, it's just amazing. It's just like I said, I had to get the stall scoop out to shovel it last night. It's pretty bad.
It's time to muck out the stalls. Donnie, thanks for your call. Let's go to Keith next. Hey, Keith, you're on the Steve Gill Show.
Hello, Steve.
Welcome in.
Want to comment here from Georgia. Hey, listened to that speech last night, and I think we were kind of warned because he's kind of did the old run around like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. It's all been heard before, hasn't it?
Yeah, and again, so much of it was literally a rehash of campaign speeches, of previous State of the Union speeches. You know, nobody questions, Keith, whether this guy's a great talker. I just question the fact that he never does any of the good stuff he says he's going to do.
You know something I noticed last night, Steve? When he was coming into the hall to speak there, he was smiling and shaking hands, and he's got a lot of charisma. And I turned to my wife and I said, if this man right here had his head on right and was a true American and really had America in mind, this guy could move mountains, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he's got the charisma to lead. The problem is he's leading in the wrong direction.
Correct.
And unfortunately, the folks that are following him aren't paying enough attention to what the results are to actually see that we need to say enough is enough. And hopefully 50% plus one will be able to register that response when we get into the election later this year, Keith. Hey, thanks for calling, man. I appreciate it.
About that Keystone?
Yeah.
I heard a man, and I don't know if you agree with this or if you've heard anything about this, but I heard a man yesterday, and he supposedly knew what he was talking about. He says the reason Obama's flipping off those states up there where the pipelines come through is because they're Republican states anyway, and he don't think he's going to get them anyway, so he don't want to tee off his EPA guys. Have you heard anything along that line?
Well, he's trying to cater to the environmentalists that want him to shut down this pipeline, and I think that's exactly right. I mean, the folks that live in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska that are going to be the biggest beneficiaries where those jobs would be created, they're not going to vote for him. It's the same reason that right after he got elected, there was a huge ice storm in Kentucky. They didn't vote for him. He didn't even come by and see the people in Kentucky. Didn't drop by. Didn't show any compassion for them. Same thing when we had floods in the Midwest. Those were red states. He didn't care. When Nashville got flooded out, he didn't care. He only cares about places where people may give him their votes. That's where he's dishing out his cash. That's where he's spending his time. That's where he spends his focus. South Florida, the Florida Gulf Coast, particularly, in that oil producing area, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, the Gulf Coast of Florida, he shut those jobs down because those folks aren't going to vote for him. I think your buddy's exactly right. He looks at who's feathering his nest when it comes to paying his attention as president. He's supposed to represent all of us.